By the age of 30, Alexander the Great had conquered almost the entire known world. By 32, he was dead, his empire shattered, and even his tomb was lost to history. But one ancient artwork, buried under volcanic ash for 17 centuries, was still hiding a secret that scientists only uncovered in 2025. Alexander the Great was born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of ancient kingdom of Macedon in north of Greece. His father, King Philip II, had transformed Macedon into the single most powerful military force in all of Greece. King Philip was a brilliant and ruthless commander who had never lost a single major battle in his life. Philip built a fearsome new kind of army called the Macedonian phalanx, armed with pikes up to 20 feet or 6 meters long. This wall of spears could push through almost any enemy that stood in front of it. As a boy, the young Alexander was personally tutored by the famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. Alexander grew up dreaming of the heroes of Greek legend, above all, the mighty warrior Achilles. At the age of 12, Alexander named a wild black horse named Bucephalus that no one else could ride. Bucephalus would carry Alexander into battle for the rest of his life. Then, in 336 BC, King Philip was assassinated and Alexander became king of Macedon at just 20 years old. Alexander inherited his father's greatest dream to conquer the mighty Persian Empire. The Persian Empire, ruled by King Darius III, was the largest empire the world had ever seen. It stretched more than 2,000 miles from Egypt in the west all the way to the edge of India in the east. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed into Asia with an army of around 40,000 soldiers. As he stepped ashore, Alexander is said to have thrown a spear into the ground, claiming all of Asia as his own. At the Battle of Granicus, Alexander won his very first great victory against the Persians. He fought at the front of his cavalry and was very nearly killed in the fighting. In 333 BC came the battle that would turn Alexander into a living legend, the Battle of Issus. For the first time, Alexander faced the Persian king Darius III in person on the battlefield. The two armies met on a narrow strip of land between the mountains and sea, which cancelled out Persia's huge numbers. Alexander was badly outnumbered, but he launched a direct charge straight at King Darius himself. Terrified, Darius turned his chariot and fled the field, even abandoning his own mother, wife, and children. Alexander captured the fleeing king's family, but he treated them with surprising respect and kindness. This dramatic moment, Alexander charging at Darius' fleece, is the exact scene later captured in the famous Alexander Mosaic, the very artwork that would keep its biggest secret hidden for 2,000 years. After Issus, Alexander marched south and captured the island fortress of Tyre after a brutal 7-month siege. In 332 BC, Alexander entered Egypt, where he was welcomed as the liberator and even hailed as a living god. At a remote desert temple called the Oracle of Siva, priests told Alexander that he was the son of a god. In Egypt, Alexander founded a brand new city and named it after himself, Alexandria. Alexandria would grow to become one of the greatest and richest cities of the entire ancient world. In 331 BC, Alexander met King Darius one final time at the enormous Battle of Gaugamela. Gaugamela was one of the largest and most decisive battles in the whole of ancient history. Darius had gathered a massive army, complete with war elephants and scythed chariots with blades fixed to their wheels. But Alexander's clever tactics tore a hole in the Persian line, and once again Darius fled for his life. Soon after, Darius was murdered by his own commanders, and the mighty Persian Empire fell to Alexander. Alexander marched into the Persian capital of Bucephalus, and its magnificent royal palace was burned to the ground. At just 25 years old, Alexander was now the ruler of the largest empire on earth. Alexander did not stop there. He pushed his army further east than any Greek had ever gone before, all the way to India. In 326 BC, at the Battle of Hydaspes River, Alexander defeated the Indian king Porus and his line of war elephants. But after 8 long years of marching and endless war, his exhausted soldiers finally refused to go any further. Heartbroken, Alexander was forced to turn his army around and begin the long journey home. On the way back, he led his men through a scorching desert, where 1,000 died of thirst and heat. In 323 BC, Alexander arrived in the ancient city of Babylon. Strange omens were said to have warned Alexander not to enter the city of Babylon at all. There, after a long night of feasting, Alexander suddenly collapsed with a burning fever. For 12 days, Alexander lay dying, slowly losing the ability to speak as his loyal generals gathered around him. His soldiers filed past his bed one by one, each wanting to see their king one last time. On June the 10th, 323 BC, Alexander the Great died in Babylon at just 32 years old. To this day, historians still argue over what actually killed him: fever, typhoid, poison, or years of heavy drinking. Alexander left behind no clear heir, and when asked who should rule, he supposedly whispered only, "to the strongest." Within hours of his death, Alexander's generals began turning on one another for control of the empire. Over the next 40 years, Alexander's vast empire was ripped apart into rival kingdoms. Alexander's wife Roxana and his young son were both eventually murdered in the brutal struggle for power. His body was placed in a golden coffin and eventually carried all the way to Alexandria in Egypt. And then, at some point in history, the tomb of Alexander the Great was lost, and it has never been found since. Because his tomb is lost, we have no confirmed portrait made of Alexander during his own lifetime. Almost everything we picture about Alexander's face come from later Roman copies of lost Greek originals. For more than 2,000 years, people have wondered what Alexander the Great truly looked like. But there is one single artwork that gives us the most vivid glimpse of Alexander in the heat of battle, and he was still guarding a secret that nobody had noticed for centuries. It is called the Alexander Mosaic. The Alexander Mosaic was discovered in the ruins of Pompeii, the Roman city destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The mosaic once decorated the floor of a grand Roman home known as the House of the Faun. The Alexander Mosaic shows the exact moment from the Battle of Issus, with Alexander charging as Darius flees in terror. It is actually a Roman copy, made around 100 BC, of a much older and now completely lost Greek painting. Most astonishing of all, the entire image is built from around 2 million tiny stone tiles called tesserae. For nearly 17 centuries, the Alexander Mosaic lay hidden and forgotten beneath the volcanic ash. It was finally uncovered by excavators digging through the ruins of Pompeii in 1831. Over the centuries, parts of the mosaic had crumbled away, leaving large blank gaps in the ancient battle scene. For centuries, no one knew exactly how or from what this enormous mosaic had actually been made. Then, as a part of a major restoration project, scientists in Naples, Italy, examined the mosaic up close in 2025. The scientists used non-invasive tools, scanning the surface without damaging a single one of the ancient tiles. Using X-ray and light-based analysis, they measured the chemistry and the colors of the individual stones. It was the very first time the entire mosaic had ever been examined in such incredible detail. Their findings were published in a scientific study in January of 2025. The study revealed something remarkable. The 2 million tiny stones had come from all across the ancient world. The white tiles were cut from Carrara marble in Italy, the very same marble later used by Michelangelo. The green stones came from Greece, and the deep red tiles were traced to Cape Matapan in the far south of Greece. The pink tiles most likely came from Portugal, and the yellow tiles came from the ancient quarries in Tunisia, in North Africa. Some of these stones had traveled well over 1,000 miles just to become part of this one single floor. Each of these stones had to be quarried, shipped across the sea, and cut down by hand into a tiny square. In total, the scientists identified 10 different colors of stone gathered from across Europe and Africa. This discovery shows that a single work of art pulled together materials from thousands of miles apart. It reveals just how connected the ancient Mediterranean world truly was. long before any modern global trade. The Alexander Mosaic still remains our most powerful surviving image of Alexander the Great in the fury of battle. And thanks to modern science, this 2,000-year-old masterpiece is still giving up brand new secrets. Every single tile is a tiny piece of story that once stretched across the entire ancient world. It is proof that even the most famous relics of history still have new stories left to tell. So here is my question for you. What other famous relic from history do you think is still hiding a secret we simply have not found yet? Drop your answer in the comments below and subscribe for more history that has been hiding in plain sight.